welcome to the deep dive. If you're a leader, or honestly, if you're just trying to build anything meaningful, you definitely know the feeling. The odds feel stacked against you.
Right.
Today, we're tearing into a really compelling stack of sources. They're all centered on faith-driven leadership and resilience, and looking at how you lead, not just despite overwhelming resistance, but maybe because of it.
Yeah, that's a twist.
I want to challenge your perspective, like right away, with this central paradox that pops up everywhere in this material. What if the intense resistance you're facing right now, the difficulty, the setbacks, those barriers that seem impossible? What if that isn't actually a sign of failure? What if it's maybe a confirmation, a signal that what you're building, what you're fighting for, it matters enough to actually be resisted?
Wow, okay. That thought, it shits your whole posture, doesn't it?
It does.
If we're being resisted, maybe it means we're actually making headway. So our mission today, really, is to move past this sort of Instagram filter view of leadership.
Effortless influence, instant success.
Exactly. That stuff that dominates the narratives. We're confronting the uncomfortable truth, the non-negotiable truth, really. That meaningful impact isn't paved with ease, it's paved with endurance.
Endurance.
So let's define the goal here. We need to stop seeing pressure as like a reason to just collapse.
Right.
And start viewing it as the catalyst for growth. We're exploring how leaders develop and then deploy what these sources are calling faith-fueled courage.
Faith-fueled courage.
Yeah, that's the core currency you need when the metrics don't add up and, your human resources are just failing.
Okay, let's unpack this resistance idea more. Because most people, in business, in ministry, just in life, they treat resistance like a stop sign.
Absolutely.
If the market rejects my idea 3 times, well, I guess I quit. If the internal politics block my vision, I just retreat. But these sources, they introduce this idea of the sacred tension of leadership.
Sacred tension, I like that.
This tension, it's inherent to having a real purpose.
Yeah.
It's this constant, sometimes agonizing push and pull, right? Between the safety of comfort and the demands of your calling.
Or between faith and fear.
Exactly, between that crippling fear and this defiant confidence of faith. So why is resistance necessary? The argument here is that true leadership isn't just found, it's forged.
Forged like metal in fire.
Yeah, it doesn't come from charisma or, the cleverest strategy session. It comes from courage that has been tested, really tested, in the fire of adversity.
And what's fascinating here is the sheer necessity of shifting your paradigm.
Yeah.
You have to view resistance as the proving ground.
A proving ground.
It doesn't show up to destroy your potential. It comes to define your character. When you look at historical figures, biblical figures, who really stood the test of time, the dividing line between those who collapsed under the pressure and those who conquered.
It wasn't talent or money.
It wasn't superior talent. It wasn't more abundant resources or even better opportunities. It was an unshakable belief, a belief that their purpose was just unequivocally bigger in their pain.
That sounds really powerful, but I can imagine a listener pushing back a bit, saying, okay, hang on. Is calling resistance preparation just a kind of spiritual coping mechanism for maybe bad planning?
That's a really important question. And I think the answer is rooted in humility.
Okay.
If you plan poorly, well, yeah, that's a consequence. That's not preparation. But true adversity, the kind that hits even the best laid plans.
Right, the unexpected stuff.
That is preparation. It's described here as a sacred space. It's where God strengthens the infrastructure of your character.
Oh, okay.
And crucially, it clarifies the very essence of your calling. It kind of weeds out the vanity projects, and leaves only what truly matters. It's the training ground for an assignment you probably can't even see yet.
That makes sense. I mean, if the task were easy, you wouldn't need courage in the first place, right?
Exactly. No courage required for comfort.
Okay, so let's look closer now at the scope of this problem. What does against all odds actually look like? These sources use a biblical framework, and it shows the odds are much broader than just, say, a bad balance sheet.
Right, it's not just numbers.
So the sources outline 4 key elements that make up this against all odds scenario. First, you have the classic numerical disadvantage.
Like Gideon's army.
Exactly, Gideon's army. They didn't start small by accident. God deliberately took 32,000 men down to just 300.
Against this massive enemy force.
Right. Why? The sources say it was so that when the victory inevitably came, there'd be zero human confusion about where that power came from.
And you can see that today, right? Starting a nonprofit or maybe a business in a market that's totally saturated, you've got like 1% of the budget of the big guys.
Yeah, that feels like 300 it against the Midianites.
It really does.
Okay.
Okay, second, we face apparent impassable barriers. These are the Red Seas in our lives.
Like systemic issues. Or just huge debt.
Yeah, or deep cultural resistance, those iron walls of bureaucracy that, honestly, no human strategy, no matter how brilliant you are, can overcome on its own. They seem designed to show you exactly where human capability just ends.
Okay, that's sobering.
And third, and this one is often the silent killer, is internal doubt and fear.
Ah, the inner game.
This could be way more paralyzing than any external giant. I mean, think about Moses, called by God to lead millions, right?
Yeah.
His first reaction was doubting his own capabilities, asking that ultimate imposter syndrome question, who am I to do this? That internal barrier, your self-perception, can halt a mission faster than any physical army.
Wow. Okay, and the final one.
And finally, the sources really emphasize spiritual opposition.
Okay.
It's this recognition that sometimes the friction you feel,
Yeah.
that constant sabotage, that unrelenting fatigue, the pressure you feel to compromise your integrity.
It's not just bad luck or difficult colleagues.
It might not be just office politics or a tough market cycle. Ephesians 6.2 is mentioned here, reminding us the struggle isn't merely against flesh and blood, but against unseen spiritual forces that are actively trying to sow discord and defeat.
That adds a whole other layer.
It does. And what's absolutely essential to grasp here is the biblical premise. God consistently, almost as a pattern, chooses to engineer situations and work through these against all odds scenarios.
So it's not an accident, it's intentional.
It seems so. Whether it's, the birth of Isaac to Abraham and Sarah, who were way past childbearing age,
Right.
or the virgin conception of Christ, these moments, they just eliminate human credit, don't they?
Yeah, you can't take credit for that.
Exactly. The principle here is, well, it's profound, but also liberating. God's strength is made perfect in weakness. That's from 2 Corinthians 12.9.
Strength and weakness.
When your human ability is utterly exhausted, when your resources just run dry, that specific point is when divine power is poised to shine the brightest. And this shifts the leader's posture completely, from despair to this deep, radical dependence.
Okay, so we understand the nature of the fight, maybe why it exists. Now, how do we actually fight? Let's shift into the courageous strategies, the ones that actively seem to defy conventional human logic.
Yeah, the how-to.
But before we list the actions, we have to make a really vital distinction here. Biblical faith versus just optimism.
Oh, that's important. They're not the same thing at all.
Not according to these sources. Optimism, they say, is human-centric. It's based on a favorable assessment of your current circumstances. Like, I think things will work out because, well, I'm smart and I have a good plan.
Right. Depends on things looking good.
Exactly. But biblical faith, defined in Hebrews 11.1, is described as a divine confidence. It's rooted not in those favorable circumstances, but in the immutable character and the unchanging promises of God, regardless of the fire you're actually standing in right now.
That difference is like the fulcrum, isn't it?
Totally.
Optimism just collapses the moment the market tanks or the plan fails. Faith, on the other hand, anchors itself even deeper when the impossible happens. So let's look at strategy number 1 they talk about, leveraging weakness, the paradox of strength.
The paradox of strengths. Okay.
So secular leadership, standard practice, demands you project invincibility.
Just hide the cracks, look strong.
You must hide your struggles. Faith leadership, though, does the exact opposite. Paul's statement, when I am weak, then I am strong, isn't just like motivational fluff.
It's strategic.
It's presented as a strategic choice. Humility and transparency in leadership, they don't just feel good ethically, they acknowledge your limitations. And that act of acknowledging makes room for a power greater than your own. You stop trying to be the sole savior of your organization.
Which is exhausting anyway.
Totally exhausting. And instead, you invite divine intervention.
Okay, but doesn't that risk undermining your authority? I mean, if I as a CEO walk into a board meeting and openly say, look, here's where I feel really weak and dependent, aren't I potentially risking my job in this highly competitive world?
That is the risk. And that's precisely where the courage comes in. The sources suggest that true lasting authority isn't derived from just projecting competence. It comes from proving character. Transparent leaders, they argue, don't ultimately lose respect. They gain trust. They gain commitment from their team because the team sees the leader as human, maybe dependent on the same higher power they might be. It dismantles that terrible isolation of leadership.
Okay, I see the logic there. What's the second counterintuitive strategy?
The second one is redefining failure.
Redefining failure. How so?
Well, think about it. In the eyes of the world at the time, Jesus' crucifixion was a total catastrophic failure. His movement looked destroyed.
Yeah, game over.
But that apparent defeat became the ultimate victory. This radically different perspective, it liberates leaders. Setbacks suddenly become data points, learning opportunities.
Not the end of the story.
Not the end. It means we prioritize faithfulness over what the world defines as success. We could take calculated, faith-driven risks because the worst-case scenario, earthly failure, isn't the ultimate defeat in this framework.
Okay, that's freeing. What's number 3?
Strategy number 3 is audacious obedience.
Audacious. I like that word.
It means acting, often immediately, on guidance, even when the path forward is totally unclear or the resources you need seem completely insufficient. The classic example given is Peter stepping out of the boat onto the water when Jesus called him.
Right, he didn't check the weather forecast first.
Exactly. He didn't pause to analyze the wind speed or the wave height or think about the lack of boat stepping training he'd received. He just went.
So for us, that means
Audacious obedience means that when you receive clear guidance, maybe through prayer or discernment, you step out before you have that perfect 50-page business plan locked down.
that takes guts.
It's calculated courage, yes, born of deep conviction. You move because the voice calling you is more compelling than the apparent impossibility of the task.
Okay. Audacious obedience. And the final strategy.
And the final strategic imperative mentioned is prayer and spiritual discernment.
Not just as a nice to have, but imperative.
Yes. This cannot be relegated to just, a box you check on Sunday morning. It has to be seen as a strategic necessity. Look at King Jehoshaphat in the Old Testament. He's faced with this vast, superior, invading army.
Right.
His first action wasn't mustering his dwindling troops or calling his generals. He sought the Lord. And his battle plan, it sounded like madness.
Send the worshipers out front.
Send the choir ahead of the army.
That's definitely counterintuitive.
It highlights the need to seek strategic intelligence that actually transcends human understanding. We so often default to human wisdom, hire another consultant, run another focus group.
The usual playbook.
The usual playbook. But these sources urge us to treat prayer as the primary intelligence-gathering mission, seeking the divine blueprint that our human logic just cannot access.
Wow. Okay, when you look at those 4 strategies together, leveraging weakness, redefining failure, audacious obedience, prayer,
What's the common thread?
the common thread seems clear. They all force the leader to shed reliance on their own talent, their own resources, and embrace this radical, almost uncomfortable dependence on the source of their calling.
Exactly. Unwavering dependence.
Speaking of actually doing this under pressure, we have to talk about the masterclass taught by Nehemiah.
Oh, Nehemiah is the perfect example.
Right. This is the definition of leading against the odds. He transformed ruins into, revelation. He led the rebuilding of Jerusalem's wall in just 52 days.
An insanely short time.
While facing relentless ridicule, conspiracies, actual threats of violence from enemies nearby.
Non-stop opposition.
But Nehemiah's impact, it was holistic, wasn't it? It wasn't just a construction project.
Not at all.
He rebuilt the physical security of the city, sure, but he also restored the people's confidence, their identity, their commitment to God's law. He unified this diverse, broken group.
And modeled resilience.
He modeled resilience. By instituting that famous rule, those carrying burdens labored on the work with one hand and held a weapon with the other.
Wow. What a metaphor.
Isn't it? That's the metaphor for sustainable leadership in these tough situations, building and guarding at the same time.
That story is so critical because it forces us to address the inner cost.
Ah, yes, the toll it takes.
Leading against the odds like that creates this crushing inner friction. Burnout, isolation, crippling self-doubt, decision fatigue. It's immense.
Right, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Exactly. Sustaining the heart and mind of the leader is absolutely as crucial as the external work. You just cannot lead effectively if you're running on empty. It's unsustainable.
So what did the sources say about staying resilient? The non-negotiables?
Well, they're very clear on these essential pillars for inner resilience. And they frame them as non-negotiables, not optional extras you fit in if you have time.
Okay, what's first?
The first is intimacy with God. Jesus himself modeled this absolute necessity. He frequently withdrew to remote places to pray, didn't he? To get strength and clarity.
Yeah. He stepped away from the crowds.
He recognized the need to reconnect with the Father, to sustain his, unbelievably grueling mission. The point made is, if the Son of God needed to pull away like that, how much more do we?
That's a powerful point. What else?
Then we have to talk about the resistance we often have to building healthy boundaries and rest.
Oh, yeah. The pressure to just keep going.
When the odds are stacked, the temptation is huge to work 2047. We assume exhaustion equals effectiveness or dedication.
The hustle culture myth.
Right. But God designed us for rhythm. The sources use the really powerful example of Elijah.
After his big victory.
Yeah, even after that mighty victory on Mount Carmel against the prophets of Baal,
Yeah.
the prophet was completely burned out. He was despairing, hiding in a cave.
You're ready to give up.
Totally. And what did God send him? Not a new strategy memo. He needed physical nourishment, sleep, and rest, ministered by an angel. Guarding the Sabbath, prioritizing sleep. These aren't luxuries. They're presented as sacred acts of faith. It's acknowledging that God doesn't actually need your ceaseless striving to complete his work.
Wow. Letting go of that need to control everything through sheer effort.
Precisely. And finally, the third pillar, community and accountability.
Not going it alone.
Leading against the odds is potentially the most isolating experience you can have. You simply cannot do it alone long term.
Jesus had an inner circle, right?
Peter, James, John.
Yes.
And Moses intentionally trained Joshua. He relied heavily on Aaron and Hur to literally hold up his arms in battle. We need a trusted circle. Mentors, peers, maybe family who can speak truth to us, who can share that immense burden and hold us accountable when we're tempted to compromise or just self-destruct under the pressure. Isolation is maybe the greatest threat to a sustained calling.
That makes so much sense. Okay, so wrapping this up. What does this entire deep dive really mean for you, the listener, the leader, facing immense pressure right now?
Yeah, what's the takeaway?
It seems to mean that leading against the odds isn't just about surviving, it's actually a forcing function. It strips away all your reliance on conventional wisdom, on your own strength.
Which fails eventually.
And it forces this radical, ultimately empowering dependence on conviction. And somehow that turns the opposition itself into pure momentum.
Opposition becomes fuel.
Yeah. Let me just reiterate that core identity shift we heard from the sources. You are not called to comfort, you are called to courage. Leadership that genuinely changes the world isn't built on ease. It's built on a faith that stands immovable when everything else around it is shaking.
Beautifully put. And maybe if we connect this back to that training ground idea for your future, here's the final thought to wrestle with.
Okay.
If your current trial, that impossibly large obstacle, the relentless doubt, the numerical disadvantage you're facing, if it's not punishment, but actually preparation.
Preparation.
What future assignment might God be training you for right now through this difficulty? And maybe the even more critical question is, are you cooperating with that preparation? Are you seeking the wisdom, the rest, the dependence we talked about? Or are you still resisting the process by trying to rely solely on your own depleted strength and purely human logic?
That's the essential question to carry with you this week.
Definitely something to think about.